change to public comment time and your responses from last week's discussion of the same topic. The Iowa Code states in chapter 21.2, number 2, that a meeting means a gathering in person or by electronic means, formal or informal, of the majority of the members of a governmental body where there is deliberation or action upon any matter within the scope of the governmental body's policy-making duties. It does provide for ministerial or social purposes, but it specifies that in those instances there is not allowed any discussion of policy or intent to avoid the purposes of the Open Meetings chapter of code. Cambridge Dictionary defines deliberation as considering or discussing something, and the American Heritage Dictionary defines it as discussion and consideration of all sides of an issue. Both of these descriptions include discussion as part of their definition, and when applied to Iowa Code 21.2, number 2, I would like you to keep in mind the topics that you are talking about with each other outside of open meetings, and if they fall within the scope of the Iowa Code. Dan, last week you admitted that the policy change had been discussed after the previous meeting. You had been adjourned, so were meetings recorded, or minutes recorded? When you mentioned calling Kurt, can we make an educated guess that this conversation was not recorded either electronically or with minutes, or is there actually a record of that discussion? While the code accounts for ministerial or social purposes not being considered a meeting, that conversation would fall under the part of the code where it says there is no discussion of policy. Bill, last week and in other previous meetings, you have said that you would only allow action items to be on the agenda. Nowhere in Iowa Code Chapter 21 does it state that agendas may only include action items. It merely states that any items to be acted upon must be included in the agenda. That is similar to how all apples are fruit, but not all fruits are apples. All action items need to be on the agenda, but not all agenda items need to be actions. The restriction of only allowing action items on your agenda seems to be something put in place by your predecessors and something you are choosing to continue. Dan, last week you said that you are getting calls and emails all the time. However, the only issues you ever seem to bring to the open meetings for discussion with the others are issues to pass along to the engineer, or in one case, the use of courthouse lawn when it was a planned agenda item. While localized road or engineer issues may not be pertinent to the entire county, there are many other concerns which are countywide issues and should be discussed with your fellow supervisors in a public meeting in accordance with the open meeting laws, and then your responses or actions toward those concerns would be on public record. If you respond only to the person submitting a request, you may be answering the same question multiple times or possibly giving different answers to different people. Consider these scenarios. If you are not bringing these issues to public meetings for discussion, even if they are not what you consider action items, how are you sharing this information with your fellow supervisors? Are you keeping it to yourself and only answering people with your own opinion? If you're not discussing these citizen concerns with the other supervisors, how do you know you're not giving out contradictory information? And again, if you're discussing it with any other supervisor, that needs to be in a recorded public meeting, as two of you constitute a quorum. Please keep in mind this following comparison. When the wind company held their informational meeting back in March 2022 in Traer, they would only answer questions to individuals, which meant that their answers could change depending on who they were speaking with, and they were not held accountable to the responses they gave. Do you want to be compared to the way many citizens feel about how wind company salesmen do their business? Repetition of comments ensure that a topic is not forgotten or lets you know there is still interest or concern by the public. And finally, last week, and in prior situations, you brought this policy to vote without any discussion beforehand, without sharing your opinions on why you are voting the way you do. You are also not saying what exactly you're voting for or against. The citizens watching often have no idea what you're voting on unless they have been present to read a printed piece of paper. I would ask that going forward, you read through or explain the issues you are voting on. To recap, please be aware of what you are talking about with each other outside of open meetings. If you do not revise the comment policy again, please think about including more topics on your agenda than what you feel are strictly action items. If you are not planning or willing to bring all citizen concerns to open meetings, then please consider reopening comment sessions for open topics. And finally, please explain what is being voted on and include public discussion before placing future votes. Thank you.